Next, from Springfield, Governor Rauner is joined by House Minority Leader Jim Durkin and Senate Minority Leader Christine Radogno as the three react to the passage of the stopgap budget funding K-12 education and other government departments. This runs about 20 minutes.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Today was a good day for the taxpayers of Illinois and for all interested parties, people who have been desperately looking for solutions to the problems that have confronted the state for the past 16 months. I particularly want to thank Governor Rauner for marshaling together the four caucuses to bring a conclusion, one which we feel is a good conclusion for Illinois, one which is a negotiated compromise between the parties. And Governor, thank you so much for your leadership on that. I will say this, that a lot of hard work went into this, and the men and women behind us in the House and Senate are the members who worked diligently for many months, part of our working groups on the issues that were brought today for vote with the stopgap budget and also the other components to the bills today. So I want to thank every one of those members of my caucus and also in the Senate for staying with the program, working hard, and fulfilling their mission. But at the end of the day, folks, the real winners are the taxpayers of Illinois. We didn't get everything that we wanted. We will continue to work on a full, comprehensive budget, one that is balanced. But today is a good day for the taxpayers because we stopped the Democrat majority from passing a $7 billion unbalanced budget on the people of Illinois and every taxpayer. So the taxpayers won, and I think the most important aspect of today is that we responded to our public on their demands that we continue to work in good faith. We have for months pleaded with the Democrat majority that we are prepared to negotiate and compromise in every given stage of this process. And they finally took our advice based on the governor's recommendation, and we've reached a fair conclusion today. So with that, I want to turn this over to the Senate Republican leader, Chris Radogno.
Again, I want to extend my thanks to the governor for his leadership in bringing this together and thwarting what would have been truly a disaster for the state beginning tomorrow. Our job is not done, so I don't want to pat ourselves on the back too hard. This is only a stopgap budget, but there's a couple of really important things that are contained in that. Number one, there is no Chicago bailout. What has traditionally happened in this state is when there's a crisis in the city legislators come hat in hand and ask for a state bailout. That did not happen. We held firm on that. In the process, I think many legislators were educated. We have Republican legislators here today, but there were also Democrat rank-and-file legislators involved, and I want to thank them as well. I think that by being so intensely involved, they learned there is no honeypot of money out there. Everything must be paid for. The bill that we passed today is affordable. There are no state tax increases. It lives within our means, but it is incomplete. So we will be back. I think that we'll continue this kind of model of cooperation. This is truly a different kind of outcome than we've had before. Fully funding schools for the first time in 7 years, and that is a full-year solution. We have a lot more work to do. We need to do a full year's budget, and importantly, we need to get those reforms that will engender economic growth, which is really the way that we get out of this problem that we have. I am very pleased to say that one piece of what we passed today was a commitment to address pension reform in exchange for assistance to the city of Chicago with their pension problem. So I think everyone's realizing it's finally time we have to address this problem. I look forward to taking a little bit of a break and then getting right back to solving the larger issue. And with that, I'll turn it over to the man of the hour, Governor Rauner.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to start by thanking Leader Radogno, Leader Durkin, and the entire members of the Republican caucus. They've done an outstanding job of standing up firmly on behalf of taxpayers for the state of Illinois. They have also stood up firmly for school children and their parents, homeowners, and the most vulnerable in our state. We faced a crisis when the supermajority left the end of May without passing any budget whatsoever. With no budget, obviously very dire circumstances come July 1st, road construction ending, many human services potentially going without any support, and the very grave risk of schools not opening in August and September. That would just be an unacceptable failure on behalf of the people of Illinois. Thank you to Leader Durkin, Leader Radonio, the Republican caucus for standing firm and coming now to a grand bargain, a grand compromise to get us through this crisis. I would also like to say, personally, a thank you to President Cullerton for some flexibility and creativity in the negotiations. And I would also compliment Mayor Emanuel for some flexibility and some creativity on his part. And the Democratic caucus has been willing to compromise, and we thank them for their efforts in that regard. Let's be clear. This is just a small step in the process of making Illinois strong and healthy and vibrant. This is a small step in the right direction. This is not a budget. This is not a balanced budget. This is not a solution to our long-term challenges. This is a bridge to reform. That's what this is. This is a bridge to reform, a bipartisan bridge to reform. And the reason it was able to come together is both sides expressed willingness to negotiate further around reforms and truly balanced budgets. The Democratic leaders made it clear in recent weeks that they would not want to take any votes on balanced budgets or reforms prior to the November election, but that after the November election, there was a very distinct possibility of that. That sentiment, that expression of the possibility of reforms and a true balanced budget, ending the days that we've had for years in Illinois of unbalanced budgets and kicking the can on pensions and borrowing and not paying our bills, the willingness to actually stand up to that right after the election during the lame duck session allowed us to come together to build a bridge to get to that outcome. In this compromise, schools can open on time, and the vast majority of school districts and schools will receive more money, an affordable amount of more money. And frankly, in Illinois, our schools deserve more money from the state. This is good public policy. Schools, first priority. Also, essential government services for our most vulnerable, human services for the families most in need, our veterans, our developmentally disabled, those who are most vulnerable. The services can continue through January. Essential that we do that. Likewise, essential government services for public safety, for corrections, for public health, and services that people of Illinois depend on every day, day in, day out. Those can continue to be provided at an acceptable level, basic level, through January. Very important. And then finally, I don't want to leave out the essence of construction. We need road construction and maintenance of our infrastructure in order to keep our economy competitive and have the opportunity to grow in the future. This bridge spending plan allows us to do that. The goal is to get us till after the election in November, and then between November and January, come up with a bipartisan grand compromise that will truly balance our budgets and get reforms to grow the economy, protect our taxpayers, provide sufficient resources so we can develop the best schools in America in every school district, not just in some, and also reform our political system and our process here. Clearly, we need reforms. We've been going down the wrong road, a gradual, slow decline in Illinois for years and years, with deficits, debt, jobs leaving, lower family incomes, higher property taxes, defunded schools too many times over the last 10 years, and a political system that's not really responsive to the voters and the taxpayers. Our efforts will never cease to change that. We need fundamental reform to change that direction. I believe, and I firmly hope, that right now we've hit the bottom. This is the low point in the evolution of Illinois. And now we begin to move up. Growth, value for taxpayers, better schools, and a political system that is responsive and actually making good decisions for the long-term health of the state. Not just short-term decisions, long-term health of the state. This bridge is an important trust-building, relationship-building part of the process. I'm pleased with the result, but it is not the long-term solution. This purely gives us the opportunity to come together in the next months and come to a solution that really restores the growth, protects our taxpayers, and properly funds our schools and human services. Thank you again for everyone here, for every member in the Republican caucus, and again, thank you for leaders on the Democratic side. Thank you for the flexibility and the cooperation so we could come to this compromise to move forward. With that, I'll open it up to questions.
Governor, there was a lot of closed-door meetings this week. Can you talk about when the compromise kind of came about?
Well, this has been an evolutionary process. There's been a lot of negotiations and private meetings going on for months. They accelerated in, I would say, the last 3 months. The working groups were close to an announcement. Then that process slowed down. I think we were pretty close to a grand compromise. When the leaders made it clear on the Democratic side that while there may be some compromises to reform the state that could make sense, votes on those were not going to be attractive to be made prior to the November election. When that was made definitively clear, that's what accelerated the process for us to come up with this bridge plan, this bridge spending plan, so we can get through the election. Because
Governor, are you a little disappointed that there aren't some elements of your turnaround agenda around or with this budget compromise? The speakers seem to be gloating about that before.
Reforms are essential, and our efforts to get significant reforms for the people of Illinois will never cease. I'm cautiously optimistic that we, in November, December, January, will see meaningful reforms. One of the reasons I'm optimistic and we were able to come together is the way we talked about our pension plan, pension reform, in the context of the city of Chicago and the Chicago teachers was very constructive. And we generated a managed roll call to vote on that pension reform plan for Chicago Teachers Union as a sign of good faith that come November, we'll come together on a bipartisan basis in a comprehensive solution for a major statewide pension reform for all pension systems as part of that bill hopefully becoming law. If we don't get that reforms, that bill for the Chicago teachers' pension will not become law, but if we get reforms, it will. Yes.
Worry at some point that the state is at a crisis, and Democrats say the governor will shelve the turnaround agenda and we'll move on, and this is going to be a pattern for the next 4 years of the rest of the turnaround.
I don't believe that will be the case. I think that the members of the supermajority, most of them, realize that reforms are needed. And I have been receiving information that post the election that they'll be willing to take some of the votes. The working groups, bipartisan working groups, were making very good progress. And the ideas coming out of those that I heard, while not all of them that I necessarily love or necessarily want to support, they were going to be good bipartisan compromise that would move the state forward in a positive direction. And I think we can get there, I believe, in November.
What incentive would Democrats have to do that post-election? The public pressure would be off, and they wouldn't really be inclined to give you a way of going into a gubernatorial election.
Well, obviously, the outcome will ultimately be impacted at least a fair bit by what happens in the election in November. I think that if there is a greater balance in the General Assembly between the Republicans and Democrats, I think the odds of very significant reforms are much higher. If there's less balance, could be the opposite. I think we've got to see what happens.
Governor, speaking of the election, you've given money to the state Republican Party, and in turn, the Republican Party appears to be making phone calls. Barbara Flynn Purdy said before there was even a vote on the floor, and with all this talk of trust, that that isn't helpful to be slamming Democrats with these votes already.
The votes happened. All the votes got done. The compromise got passed. You'll see very aggressive electioneering every day going forward between now and November 8th. That's a fact, both sides. Some of the supporters of the caucus on the other side started the mailers, what is it, about 3 months ago now. It's just part of the process. It's what we've got to do. It's easy for folks to say, oh gosh, I got a mailer, so why would I take this? The political campaigning is its own process. We have a duty to govern, to manage the affairs of the state properly, to get balanced budgets, and come up with a way we can grow our economy. Our biggest challenge is we've got to become a growth state. We've got so much deficit, debt, unfunded pensions, and unpaid bills. If we don't grow, we won't solve that problem. We've got to become a growth state. We can't tax our way out of the problem. It's not possible.
Governor, given the pain that we've seen in the last year with agencies closing and people being uncertain, do you have any regrets about tying your turnaround agenda items to the budget and making, I won't pass a tax increase without those items, and you only have to stop that because you said you don't have to. Mr. Madigan said today we'll agree to lose when he doesn't put those things in the budget. Has it been a mistake at all to tie that to the budget because of this full year we've waited?
So I've been very clear on two things from day one, and those two things aren't changing, and they will not change. One is I will not sign off on an unbalanced budget, and I'm not going to. And number two, I will not sign off on any new taxes without meaningful structural reform. I've been clear on that for the last year and a half, and that is not going to change.
Governor, some Democrats.
This budget, though, by being incomplete, kicking the can down the road, set us up for large tax increases. You don't want to pass an unbalanced budget, but without new revenue, the state continues to be unbalanced.
Again, this is not a budget. What this is an attempt at good faith compromise to set up the possibility for a grand bargain. That's what this is about. The Republicans are supporting a short-term bridge in good faith at trying to meet the Democrats part of the way to what they wanted. And likewise, the Democrats have indicated a willingness around pension reform and other reforms in our negotiations. And this is an effort to start to build that relationship and develop the confidence. We're doing some things, and we've put in some things that isn't our first choice. They're doing some things that are not their first choice. I'm very proud of the Republican caucus for standing firm. The $7 billion out-of-balance budget that passed the House, absolutely, shockingly, failure for the people of the state. And likewise, the education funding bill that passed the Senate with close to $1 billion more in spending, with a lot of that, more than $500 million, going to the city of Chicago. That was not fair. That wouldn't be fair to the taxpayers of the state. Republicans stood firm against that. We came to a reasonable place on a bipartisan compromise, and I'm cautiously optimistic we can use the negotiations that got us here to bring a constructive resolution after November 8th.
Last question. What is November about? What's the election in November about?
I've lived in Illinois my whole life and followed the governmental political process fairly closely. In many ways, I don't know of a more important election than this one, November 8th. This election will in large part determine whether we stay on the track that we've been on for decades of job losses, lower family incomes, the highest property taxes in America, the worst credit rating of any state in America, the biggest unfunded pension in any state in America, and never, ever balanced budgets, truly balanced budgets. And school funding cut repeatedly for years. And a political system that is pretty rampant with corruption and cronyism and patronage. Are we going to stay on that track, or are we going to go in a new direction? More growth, more value for taxpayers, better funding for schools, less corruption and conflict of interest in government. This election will largely determine that outcome. If the structure of the General Assembly stays in, where the Republican caucus has a very, very limited voice, the pro-growth caucus, the pro-growth voice is very limited, the chances to make Illinois more prosperous go way down. If if the Republican caucus has a little bit of a louder voice, probably not a majority, that's not likely, although it's possible, we could always hope, but if we have a little bit of a stronger voice and there's a little more balance, I think we have a chance to take Illinois in a very strong direction. We have the hardest working people in America, the best location of any state in America, the best agriculture, the best infrastructure. If we could get our policies in Springfield to be different than they've been and become more pro-growth, the prosperity in Illinois, the future for the families of this state could be very bright indeed. And that's really what's on the line November 8th.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks very much, everybody.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.